you who don't know me, I'm Rachael Long, and I've been a farm advisor in Yolo, Solano, Sacramento County, Sacramento Valley for almost 30 years now. Can you guys believe that? Anyways, and I've really had a long time interest in looking at sort of harnessing ecosystem service from Mother Nature to help us with controlling pests in farm fields. And so I've had a long time interest in, looking for ways to attract natural enemies to farms. But there's much more. Certainly, there's, good agronomic practices, and certainly, healthy soils is key for really making sure that we have healthy plants that then are best able to withstand pests and diseases and weed intrusions and such. And so this is a lettuce field. I think it's down in the Solano Valley, but interplanting the alyssum, the white flowers in the lettuce, and lots of our beneficial insects as adults need nectar and pollen to survive and reproduce. So those resources, those flowering plants, are critical for sustaining these natural enemies in fields. And so that on the left is a syrphid fly, also called a bee fly or hoverfly, and as an adult, it feeds on nectar and pollen. And then underneath that is the larva, the syrphid fly larva that's feeding on aphids. And you can always tell the predators from like a caterpillar pest because the predators are moving around. They're really fast. I have a fun video of an aphid being eaten by a ladybug later on. And then in this, in the upper right corner, let's see if I can get a laser pointer. Here we go. Right here, this is a parasitoid wasp, a parasite, sometimes they're called, and it's got its abdomen curled around, and it's stinging an aphid and laying an egg inside. And these are in the bee family, so they need nectar and pollen as adults, and that's why the flowers are critical. And even ladybugs, this one right here, that they during times of prey scarcity, they'll also feed on flowers. And ladybugs are pretty neat. This year, I saw more ladybugs than I think I have ever seen in my entire life in some alfalfa fields. And I know other people have mentioned that as well. And ladybugs are neat because they're migratory, these the native ones. And so they'll during the winter or summer and winter time, they're up in the Sierra foothills or the coastal foothills, and in these big masses, by the millions that they aggregate together. And then come springtime, they migrate down into the valley. And when I was a student at Berkeley, I had an opportunity to work with a professor who did a lot of studies on these ladybugs, but missed the chance of going up in the hot air balloons and with him and following these flights of ladybugs that are essentially a mile up in the air. So we'll start seeing ladybugs back in the valley. I mean, some of them do overwinter in the valley too. And you can find them like in deer grass and kind of protected areas, but a lot of times they're up in the mountains. So I know, Brian, you're on, that has that incredible cover crop from a couple of years ago of the bell beans, just phenomenal. And Scott, I think you're on too. And we've talked about I think you have the 7 C's, and now we've increased it to 9 C's for growing healthy crops. And so these are just a list of the agronomic practices that are critically important for managing insect pests and diseases and weeds, and that crop timing. I'll talk a little bit about that, but timing your planting to avoid and escape some of the insect pests and the flights is definitely critically important. And on the very bottom, I've also added crop choice, because there's some crops, where we just can't manage the insect pests really well. One of them is lygus bugs. This is this little insect that has a beak, and when it probes different strawberries and cotton and beans, that you'll get these blemishes and stains, and this is black eye beans right here. And I've seen where, gosh, you can have 50–60% damage of the crop. So when I say crop choice, maybe you can't grow beans in your particular area organically if you have a lot of the lygus bugs around. So that's what crop choice refers to, is choosing crops that work in your system. But last year, for the past couple of years, we've been doing some work on black eyes with some new varieties that are resistant to aphids, the black bean aphid, cowpea aphid, and that CB77, that new variety right there. And we're hoping that this variety here is going to get released soon because it shows resistance. Like this is basically all dead from black bean aphid, and yet this new variety is tolerant to those aphids in the sense that it resists the aphids pretty well, and also it actually looks pretty good for lygus, and it's some sort of biochemical in that resists, or that the lygus and aphids don't like. So really hoping that the release will come in the next year or two on this particular variety, and so that we could it does show some resistance to lygus bugs. I mean, really good. Like my control plots would have 50 stings per 200 seeds, and then this would have maybe 7. So there's some hope on the horizon for new varieties coming out. And then,
so it's both lygus and aphid resistant.
It is. Yeah, they're finding.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat, and it's a gene that comes out of Africa, and I really hope that Africa got something for this, because it really is just a tremendous. It's like side-by-side resistance is amazing. You'd have one plant like packed with aphids and the other clean. So variety selection is
it's a single gene resistance though.
They're not exactly sure. There's a PhD student working on that, but they know it's biochemical, so somewhere in there. And so we know, variety selection is very important. Always choose, plants or seed that's highly resistant to pests and diseases when you can for planting. And site selection. Watch those places that can flood or have high salts. Actually, this one on the left is a flooded alfalfa field. This is our shop way back here, and we actually, my husband is retired from farming up in the Zamora area, but this is our neighbor. And, it was like a drought forever, 5 years. And then you think you can plant in these areas because you haven't seen water there in 10 years. And then 1 year that the water comes up, and that, alfalfa doesn't tolerate standing water. So really watch and where you choose the planting of the crops. And then, ground prep is just so important. I mean, you want to make sure you don't have hard pans. So here's an alfalfa root that comes down and then it goes sideways. And I would say during wet years, maybe half of my calls have to do with just soil compaction. So for example, this is a sunflower field in the upper right, and you can see some plants are really tall and others, like right in here or right back here, are just really short. And it was due to soil compaction, and the field was just worked too wet. And once plants are stressed like that, then you have a lot more problems with insect pests that just come in. And in this case, my father-in-law always said that a cultivation was, just as, or what would you say? Oh, an irrigation is just as good as a cultivation. Sorry, for getting plants, to grow. So an irrigation is just as good as a cultivation. And so in this case, they cultivated and irrigated, and actually the plants just popped out. But down south where they have sandier soils, they can get away with not working ground as much as we need to up in this area where we have heavy clay soils. So soil compaction is a big issue. And then you have to watch for low and high spots. Like this is an alfalfa field where flood irrigated up, and this was just dry spot, and then weeds persist in there. And then certainly cleaning equipment. That this is a field that actually right near Woodland, and where we have problems with stem nematodes, which is a big pest of alfalfa, and essentially the swather went from an infected field into a clean field, and then so this is exactly the width of a swather, and just introduced that nematode there until it cleaned out. So cleaning equipment is critically important to make sure that you're not spreading pests around. So at least certified seed, and Ben Franklin always said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and certainly that's definitely money in the bank there. So what I thought I'd do for the rest of this talk is just focus in on talking about how to just managing different pests that are out in the field, and some of these are troublesome, and I just would love your thoughts on if there's other strategies that have worked for you guys. But certainly, soil health is probably one of the key areas to make sure that that plants are healthy, and then they can withstand pests a lot better. Because it's like if they, for example, with trees, that if the sap is really flowing and an insect tries to bore in, that it gets pushed out by that sap. And so healthy trees and healthy plants do resist pests a lot better than ones that are struggling. So this is just an example of planting some, looks like Ami visagni, toothpick Ami out in, which is an umbelliferae out in a field so again, for attracting natural enemies. And on the bottom, on the right is this is green lacewings here, and larvae feeding, the green lacewing larvae feeding on aphids. And, one year we did a study where we thought, well, maybe we'd buy a ton of lacewings and release them out in fields for bean aphid control. It was in sugar beets way back when. Tells you how long ago that was for our area. But we didn't see any efficacy. And what it turned out is that the particular aphid species that we bought actually hated the black bean aphid. It would run up and grab it and bite it and then spit it out. And so sometimes there's incompatibilities between, say, lacewings that you release out in the field and the pests that are actually there, and those particular insects might not like that particular pest. So it's something to pay attention to. There's a lot of resources available. I like the UCIPM guidelines because some of these I helped to author, and I think there's a lot of great information in there about monitoring and IPM threshold levels, when to treat, and how to manage them. And then this is a great poster that you can download off the UCIPM website that's Meet the Beneficials, and all the pest and beneficial insects that are out there that are working for us. Let's see, I wonder if that's gonna, oh, that's too bad. Anyways, so I just wanted to share a couple of them, and I was hoping that this one would play, but it wouldn't. Anyways, there's a ladybug here, and it scrambles out and it feeds on this aphid. So I'm sorry that we can't watch that. I don't know why I imported it, and now it just doesn't want to play. But these are just some that I think that we sort of don't see as much, but I think they're just workhorses out there. A fun one is this soldier fly. Somebody brought this larvae into my office on the upper left. It's about the size of a penny, and they brought it in, and it was from a compost pile, and so those are actually soldier flies, and they definitely help to break down, organic matter. Another insect that I really like is this colops beetle. It's really it's like incredibly abundant later in the season. It's kind of a metallic green and red and very distinct colors. Our ladybugs, of course, the eggs and the larvae, the adults, and then these soldier beetles. The soldier beetles are pretty neat. They come out in the spring, and they're really, really good aphid feeders. And I always wondered where they overwinter. And one day out at we have a pond in the back of our ranch. And one day I pulled up a board, and there were like 100 of them right there, and they all scooted down in holes in the ground. So I think they're kind of vernal pools that they're just all around, but in the ground. And so those are ones that I think are really important. And maybe at some point I could give a talk on identifying natural enemies. Caterpillar pests, always a big problem. And in some years, they could be some years like this year, like in alfalfa, we had the worst outbreaks of the alfalfa caterpillars that we've seen in like 20 years. So some of them are cyclical. The cutworms always roll up into a little sea. The big things about the cutworms and armyworms, to me in particular, is they sneak up on you. They're under dirt clods, and they're hidden, and so you just don't see them. And then the next day you come out and your crop is gone. And so you really have to watch these. And there are outbreak years, and just really sort of pay attention. And if you see some damage, start like digging in the soil a little bit and seeing what you can find. I mean, so natural enemies are really important for helping to control caterpillar pests. The trichogramma here on the lower left. So this is a little wasp right here, and it's going to sting one of these caterpillar eggs, and then when it gets parasitized, it turns black like this. We also have these wasps, and they're called hyposoder. Anyways, they were amazing too. Again, we were doing work in sugar beets, and we were actually trying to put larvae out there and to do a study on thresholds. And as fast as we put out the larvae, these guys just came and essentially just grabbed them and parasitized them. They're out there and they're working for us. So again, planting flowering plants and providing resources for adults is critically important and does make a difference for pest control. And certainly, monitoring the crop. And there's quite a few insecticides available if needed. And I've just listed some of those there. Like the just microbials like Zentari or Agree. There's also Grandivo and Trust for cutworms, Seduce, which is a spinosid success bait. And so those, it seems like, the summer, or excuse me, the worm control is really making sure just to watch and monitor and to know, and to look under dirt clods just so you don't miss some of these issues, because sometimes they can hit really hard and really fast. And I have to say, birds eat bugs too. So the thing about birds is that in the spring in particular, like most all birds are eating insects because they have to feed their young a really high energy source, and then later in the year they may switch to feeding on seeds, and certainly some of them do feed on greens, leafy greens, and cause some damage, but overall that birds are good, and learning to live with birds is, I think, really important because they do a lot of good for us. We did work in a walnut orchard and found that in the wintertime, birds were preying on about almost 40% of codling moth that were overwintering in the bark of trees. So here's a little bird here, and we had a little codling moth here that it was that for a study that we were doing, and they're pretty voracious predators. Of course, that birds can cause some crop damage, and this is just a picture of somebody who put T-bars out in a field, and this is a Cooper's hawk right in the center right there, and found that really helped to prevent bird damage to the leafy greens. And then up in the Tule Lake area that I've done some work up there, and which is basically northeastern California. And at the research station, the UC research station, they had big problems with flocks of birds coming in and feeding on their the grain trials. And so they put up this inflatable man, the inflatable waving man with the green and blue colors apparently. And they just said that this thing just works incredibly well for keeping birds out. That nothing else worked, but this did. The problem was getting a generator out there and making sure that that generator is working and going all the time. But it's the flocking birds that are really a problem. And sometimes you think, well, if I put in habitat, I'm going to just get tons of birds, and that might feed on my crop. But the big problem is really the flocking birds, and those are not queuing in on like habitat on the field edges, but rather on the crop itself. And so anyway, so that's been working. And of course, I can't have give a talk without sharing bats are also important too. And by the way, if anybody's interested, I have 5 bat houses here in my office that an Eagle Scout made for a project. So if anybody is interested in a bat house, please contact me, and I would love to get these bat houses out. That the Eagle Scout from Sacramento just did a super job with building these bat houses, and I would love to get some of those out. There's great new publication out supporting beneficial birds and managing pest birds by a Wild Farm Alliance, and then of course birds are great like owls for rodent control, and I know that Margaret has just put out a publication about controlling rodents on farms, but boy, barn owls are good, and they can get a lot of rodents. And certainly every one they take is one less that that we have to worry about. And what I see now is like those darn burrowing rats, you know, that jeepers, they, you know, they live underground and they can run up in the trees and they feed on the nuts. And so that's another big pest that I'm seeing out there. They're, what are they, burrowing roof rats or something that that they shake the trees to try to get the nuts out, and it rains rats. And that's been a big problem. So, but a topic of another talk. So I got to move on. So aphids are probably really, gosh, one of the certainly one of the most troublesome pests. You know, my favorite story about aphids and controlling aphids was Short Knife Farms and the McElrabies, and they said that what they did is they would buy tons of adult ladybugs, and then they would get a can of Coca-Cola, and they would make a slurry of ladybugs and Coca-Cola, and they just claimed that the Coca-Cola, the sugar there, just sealed the wings shut of the ladybugs, so the ladybugs couldn't fly away. And then they'd put them out on their broccoli, and they swore that they got really good control of those cabbage aphids in particular. So, you know, so gosh, you know, there's these little tidbits that that seem to work, but there's lots of different kinds of aphids. If you go in the UCIPM guidelines, I mean, you can see the variety here. And the green peach aphid, you know, spring and fall, and we used to monitor those, and there were like big smokestacks out there that were just suction cups that would, you know, pull in the air and pull in the green peach aphid, and so then sugar beets were planted, you know, after the flights of green peach aphid, and so these insects really do have cycles, and it's really important to pay attention to that if you can, you know, and try to avoid some of these the flights. But it's really hard and really challenging. You know, you can always tell an aphid because it's got these cornicles, those projections right here on the back, the body. They reproduce. They bear live young. That's why they reproduce so fast. And then they excrete this honeydew right here, and then the honeydew gets colonized by a sooty mold, and then of course you have the cast skins when they molt, and they leave behind these the cast skins, and it's that you know, aphids are kind of funny in that that they have two guts, and they have like a gut like a straw that goes from the beak to the end of its body, and it's so that when it pierces the plant, it can get rid of that pressure really fast. And so 90% of the sap just goes straight out the back end. And then you've got a modified gut that absorbs about 10% of the plant sap and for the nutrients. But so when you see all that stickiness, it's just basically just all plant sap from the aphids. And
why do they exude honeydew? Isn't that a waste of energy?
You know, it's what they have is they have a straw essentially that goes through their body from their beak to their rear end. And so when they pierce the plant, they've got to get rid of that pressure. So otherwise they would blow up. So basically they pierce the plant, and 90% of the sap just shoots out the back end. And so then they've got a modified gut that then absorbs the nutrients. But so when you find you're stepping on all that stickiness, it's just basically exuding most of the sap, because otherwise the pressure just would make them explode. So one of the things that I see a lot, at least in our area, is from aphids, is just the diseases that they vector. And so you have, like, you know, alfalfa mosaic virus in particular, and I see that in beans, and you'll see, like, this is in limas, and it'll be a sort of yellow mottled discoloration. And this is garbanzo beans, and basically the aphids can't reproduce in garbanzos, but they can carry these diseases, and most of them comes out of alfalfa. It's just alfalfa is just a reservoir for this alfalfa mosaic virus. And so for garbanzos planted, say, right next to alfalfa, or even lima beans planted next to alfalfa, if you get an aphid flight, they come out and they can't reproduce in garbanzos because of the acidity that's got you know, acids, prussic acid in there. And so what happens is that wherever the aphid lands, basically injects the disease and then it dies. And so you'll often see like a hopscotch, pattern of just diseases out there. And so in terms of if you're growing garbanzos, or if you're growing, limas, really watch that alfalfa mosaic virus. And I would not plant any beans next to alfalfa for that reason. And of course, the aphids, they inject toxins, and we're having a huge problem with the blue alfalfa aphid in alfalfa, and injecting toxins and being in the plant like when it should. They're in there in the wintertime and they shouldn't be there, but they're injecting toxins and really stunting the alfalfa, and finding it really challenging to control that pest. So we talked about resistant varieties, natural enemies, watching for excess, and really avoiding virus reservoirs like alfalfa. Oh, controlling ants. Ants farm alfalfa, farm the aphids, and they like the honeydew that the ants that they're being secreted by these aphids. They love that honeydew, and they'll protect aphids and colonies, and they'll fight off natural enemies. So that if here's a parasitoid wasp that just emerged, basically chewed its way out of this mummified aphid, and these ants will fight those parasitoid or parasites off and prevent them from getting parasitized. So important to control ants. And then
sorry, I'm going to interrupt real quick. We've got a couple of questions. The most recent, how does one control ants? Somebody asks, and then someone also has an observation. He's had a big problem with black aphids on beets and spinach in late winter, early spring most years, but this year they've been bad since December.
Yeah, and I think they've been bad this year because we've just had such a warm year, and I think that's where the problems are coming into alfalfa, is that we used to have much harsh winters, and we're not, and so a lot of these insects are just starting to just overwinter and hang around, and so it really takes watching and really making sure that they don't have an opportunity to build up, and that's really challenging, and so at this point, if they really are building up, I mean, there's some insecticides. How well they work, I'm not sure. I know that I was talking to somebody about using like diatomaceous earth mixed in, say, 50 gallons of water per acre to spray on the plants. And I think that my feeling is it's probably mostly washing the aphids off at 50 gallons per acre. But certainly there's like the Pyganic or Azera and Grandivo and different mixtures. And but once those aphids get sort of like they are really hard to control. And does anybody else have any suggestions? This is one pest that's definitely challenging. Does anybody else want to share anything? And as far as aphid control, or excuse me, ant control. So yeah, there are baits that are coming out now that like with some boric acid at sort of a sublethal dosages, so that they're being brought back to the nest and fed to the young, and then the nest will kind of slowly weaken. And so rather than just killing the insect right there, that if that happens, then these social insects will just wall off that food source. Like if they see it's killing some of their workers, they'll just stop eating it. So these new baits that are out, they're sublethal doses, and these insects are taking it back to their nest and slowly weakening those nests. So certainly if you look for the boric acid baits, and but there's UC Riverside does a lot of work on ants, and I just ants are they're just really challenging to control because they have a lot of non-native species that have come in. But if people are interested, I can maybe try to dig up a little more information from UC Riverside and see where they are on some of their the new ant baits that they've been working on, with particularly with the boric acid and where that stands. So Does anybody have any other thing they'd like to add for for aphids? Again, I just talked to somebody that had some problems with aphids, and they used that diatomaceous earth and 50 gallons per acre of water, and they felt that that it helped control them. But you really got to get them early on. And
preventative spraying seems like the only. I mean, if you kill, 5 or 10 of them on a plant to keep the population from going, but once you got them all over the plants, it's
too late. Yeah, I know. It's so frustrating. That's why you just really have to watch and keep them from building up, early on. So
two quick questions or comments in the chat. Somebody comments that using tanglefoot on tree crops can help with ant control. And somebody also asks if ants perform any benefits.
Let's see. They do perform benefits, and one of the big ones I heard a talk about. Basically that they move a lot of seed around and help bury seed, and apparently for sort of restoring habitats. That's important. But they also move around a lot of weed seeds as well. So. If people are interested in ant talk, and for a lunchtime speaker, maybe Patricia, we could get Dr. Phil Ward, who studied ants for his whole life. And can we put that on maybe an agenda for him to talk about ants, as it seems to be interest. And Dr. Phil Ward, you never want to go for a walk with him because 100% of the time he's on his knees, not going anywhere. So, but can you write a note and let's have him give a talk? So
definitely, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, one last question from the chat. Somebody asks, how many pounds of diatomaceous earth with the 50 gallons of water?
Oh, I don't know. Does anybody else have any ideas?
5 to 10.
5 to 10? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So good.
And one more. Someone has had luck with spraying molasses on aphid weekly over a few weeks and says that gave control.
Molasses, okay. Is that something that's registered? Something to check if you're producing, for organic production? I don't know. What do you, Jim, molasses? I don't know. So just always check to see if something's registered, before you.
Rachel, this is Scott Park.
Hi, Scott.
We use molasses actually with microbes, and we just experimented last year on spraying it, just the molasses that we had in the shop, just spraying it on aphid, and lo and behold, it actually worked.
Oh, good to know. Okay, good to know.
It was starting early before any problem there was. The aphid were evident, but it wasn't a high population.
Yeah.
It's super cheap, like maybe $2 an acre on an application. So it's one of those where how can you lose trying it? Right. So it's really getting in there early and trying to suppress everything, the aphids, before they become a problem. So so thrips, we'll move on for thrips. Of course, they also can distort plant tissue and vector diseases, and then this is on the right. This is just a leaf with with all their we call it frass, and which is basically insect excrement, and we've just all decided it's because it's from the ASS. That's why it's called frass. But in any case, the thrips, you can get, like in tomatoes, you'll get these rings where the two tomatoes are touching each other, and then the thrips are feeding there. And the big problem is, of course, because thrips vectors in all sorts of viruses, not just in tomatoes with tomato spotted wilt virus, but in onions, the iris yellow spot virus, and then lettuce too. There's a number of viruses there that actually USDA is working on down in Salinas, and somebody gave a really interesting talk there too. So thrips are a big problem because they really do vector a lot of diseases. And so natural enemies, there's a great natural enemy of thrips. It's called a six-spotted thrips. So this is your bean thrips, and not to be confused with the beneficial ones.
And essentially the easiest way to tell your predators, again, is that they run around and they're attacking the pests, whereas the pests really don't have to go anywhere. So some really abundant ones are this minute pirate bug right here. These are tiny. I mean, you can barely see them with a naked eye, but the nymphs are bright orange, and these are really good predators. This one is nailing actually a lygus bug. And then of course the Colops beetle. And you know, for thrips control, you know, there's certainly spinosad success that works well. But for controlling viruses, you really have to watch the weed hosts that a lot of these a lot of the thrips are picking up the viruses in weedy, you know, invasive weedy hosts. And then when those dry down, then they move into the adjacent crop. And so for the tomato spotted wilt virus that in tomatoes, it's mostly prickly lettuce, sow thistle, bell beans, and cheeseweed or malva, and also this spiny buttercup right here. So it has yellow flowers, and this is what it looks like when it's infected with the tomato spotted wilt virus. So for controlling the viruses that are spread by these insects, it's really about weed control. And but in terms of managing the thrips, again, it's like using like success or spinosad will work well. Mites, I see mites as mainly a problem where you have water stress, and it seems like if you go out into a sunflower field, a sunflower seed field at the end of the season, you'll always find a ton of mites and thrips. And certainly watch dust. That mites tend to have big outbreaks when you have a lot of dust, because somehow it interferes with these predatory mites, which are these shiny ones right here that's feeding on this mite right here. Certainly, there's different, like sulfur can help with russet mites or soap sprays and such. But from what I've seen, and I think you guys, certainly probably also, is just really watch that water stress and keep the dust under control. Flea beetles, God, these are just such a pain. And especially the pale striped flea beetle, and that not to be confused with the western striped cucumber beetle. So the flea beetles, they jump, so you can always tell that they're flea beetles because they've got this huge hind coxa that just allows them just to leap, and so whereas the striped cucumber beetles, just doesn't have that at all. These are so hard to control, and so part of it has to do that the adults will overwinter under crop residue and such, and so really disking that in and letting that break down. Row covers, but boy, that gets super expensive. Really, once the plants are established, then at least to the 5th leaf stage, then basically they can withstand some damage. And so just some thoughts on insecticides. The kaolin clay, maybe diatomaceous earth. Has anybody else found anything else to be effective on that one? Yeah, that I think these are.
The surround is very effective.
What's that?
The surround is very effective.
Okay, the surround is okay. Good to know. Good to know. So,
Rachael, Scott, I've actually found irrigating for both darkling ground beetle and what's the beetle you were just talking about? Oh,
the
it seems like they're flea beetle, right? They're feeding because they're I just assume they're feeding because they're thirsty. Like we haven't irrigated. I never find a problem after we've irrigated.
Right.
It always seems like it's a problem before we're irrigating.
I'm wondering if some of these pests, like you were saying with the darkling beetle, that if you plant early, it doesn't seem like there is much of a problem. But if you do the later planting ones, and then the weeds start to dry down, and it's really dry, and they're moving out of the weeds into the adjacent crops, and like when you see that starting to happen with the edge effect, get an irrigation on if you can. Sometimes that's just not possible. But yeah, just definitely, that's what I've heard too, Scott, is getting an irrigation on to keep them out. Seed corn maggots, I only see seed corn maggots basically in wet years where you have a lot of I don't know, biomass out there from a cover crop. And years ago, we did a lot of trials at UC Davis on dry bean production with Steve Temple. Some of you may remember him. And I just remember how if you had a big cover crop and then you incorporated that and didn't let it break down and it was a wet year, that you'd have the problems with seed corn maggot. And those, of course, attack the seeds. Here's the larvae right here. And then this is what the adults look like. And so what we would do is that in fields that had chronic problems with this, with the seed corn maggot, is we would actually put out these yellow bowls right here as basically traps or indicators for for monitoring for the flights of the seed corn maggot. So it was the adults. And so what we do is we'd put a little bit of water in this bowl, and then we'd add a little, like a drop of soap to break the tension. And then we'd put these out in the field, and we would catch like 50 or 60 of these flies a day. I mean, we had a horrendous population. And then we would just wait until we started to see that population decline. And once it had declined, then we would go ahead and plant. But we certainly wouldn't plant in the, at the peak of the flights, because these things, I mean, I remember somebody told me, like in Colusa County one year, this is a long time ago in the 90s, that they planted 300 acres and just basically the seed corn maggot just got every single seed. So, but it just seems to be in some fields, wet years where you have a lot of biomass. And if you have problem fields, then definitely monitor before you plant crops.
What I always noticed on the seed corn magnet, if you put seed in the ground and the temperature was below that at which the seed would do very rapid germination, then you would have a lot of problem with seed corn magnet. But if you're at the right soil temperature and that seed takes off right away, I think it has compounds. They produce compounds very quickly that seem to ward off the seed corn magnet. I've noticed.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think where I've seen the biggest problem is with garbanzo beans, that it's planted as a winter crop. And so you're right. If you've got beans that come right out of the ground real fast, then it just seems to be okay, that it seems to escape that. Darkling beetles, Scott, we just talked about that in terms of irrigation, earlier plantings. Again, I think they're coming out when the weeds are drying out on the edges of fields. They're looking for water. So if you see them, really watch for them. Actually, this is a hedgerow field that's up in the Zamora area, and this is not due to darkling beetles. It's actually due to rabbits. Darn, those cottontails! I swear to God, they do so much damage, and they look cute, but boy, don't just it's deceiving. And same with like jackrabbits. I mean, we lost 15 acres of sunflowers this last year from jackrabbits. So those are
cute.
Yeah. Well, that's a disguise. So we've had some falconers come out, and maybe some of you guys have too, that help to decrease the numbers. But jackrabbits are everywhere, but cottontails will only be there if you have some sort of cover, and they seem to build up. And you think they're cute at first, but watch that. So, just also wanted to make sure that people were aware of like the darkling beetles, that they're small, and whereas carabid beetles, which are predators like your tule beetle and other beetle predators, that these are bigger. And the tule or stink beetle, God, those are just god awful when they get in your house, because they stink to high heaven. And but they're actually predators, and so they're actually good outdoors. But twice a year they seem to disperse and at least come into my house and look for any crevices to hunker down in for the summer or for the winter. So but yeah, for controlling those, they're getting in, they can sneak in under doors, and so just try to keep them out, because they're good outside, but bad indoors. That's this tule beetle. And I remember I had worked for a guy, and he said that he would visit his aunt and uncle, and they had tons of chickens, and the chickens used to love to eat these tule or stink beetles, and he could taste it in the meat. Just god awful. So he didn't like to go there at certain times, because they would cook the chicken up, and it was just horrible. So cucumber beetles, I'm not going to spend much time on here, because actually Jasmine, who's a graduate student at Davis, is doing a lot of work on the cucumber beetles. And this is another just wicked pest. You've got the spotted and then the striped cucumber beetle. And the striped is really the worst because it goes underneath these like melons and it just scars the fruit. And I remember that we used to grow watermelons, and I remember David decided one year he couldn't stand these cucumber beetles. And so he got his backpack sprayer and his malathion, and he just went from one plant to the next, feeling very satisfied with spraying them. But he overdosed his plants and he killed every single one of his watermelon plants. So, but that's how mad he was. You know, these things are bad. And we did some studies. So the spotted one, you know, they'll take out stands and they feed on leaves. It's the stripe that's the hardest. And I think they're overwintering like in field edges. The spotted, I think they actually migrate farther, and they'll go up into the foothills and maybe adapted to the valley flooding. But there's reports, you know, from the 30s of these spotted cucumber beetles, you know, leaving the valley and going up into the foothills. And I see them in the fall, you know, migrating through and then coming back. But the striped cucumber beetles, I think, are overwintering around fields and underneath the debris. And there are little parasitoids, flies or parasite flies, this one on the left, that do prey on these. This is a striped cucumber beetle, but we've never found enough, you know, high enough populations to really keep that under control. So we've got Margaret and this team at UC Davis and with Ian Grettenberger, he's in the center, and he's our new field crop entomologist for both vegetables and also field crops. And so we've been doing some studies on how to control this pest. And so his student Jasmine, excuse me, is going to be giving a talk on the control practices. But in this 1 year, I'm just going to show this graph, and she may show it again. And so this is a graph of looking at different insecticides, organic, and also a sale. It would be your that's your conventional insecticide, but it's just looking at melon damage in the hatch bar and cucumber beetle counts. And so for the untreated, we can see that the melon damage was really high, about 40%. And although numbers weren't significantly different in the dark bar, the surround plus the sea light and then the entrust and what sidetrack is a cucumber beetle stimulant and surround, that those treatments were helping to reduce at least the damage by, in particular, the striped cucumber beetle. And so Jasmine will talk more about this and about some of the like sidetrack is a cucumber feeding stimulant, but there's also a new pheromone that's out that basically it's an aggregation pheromone that might help for monitoring the beetles and controlling them better. They've been looking at traps and such. So yeah, so stay tuned for her talk, and she's been working on this for a couple of years, so that'll be interesting. And
what is a sale?
Oh, a sale is a neonicotinoid.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's
that sidetrack and entrust, isn't that commonly done as like a bait more than as the spray on?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you. It is.
Yeah, we used to use it in combination with entrust as a bait, and you glob it on. You don't spray it finely because it's cucurbitacin, and it attracts the cucumber beetle. I mean, it's useful, but it's no 100%. You can reduce populations with it, but you're not going to eliminate the problem.
Yeah, you're not. So I did some work on it too, like back in the 90s with that sidetrack and molasses, and I think we used like 7, because 7 is a insecticide that was really good against the cucumber beetles, and I think we got maybe 50% better control, but not a huge amount, and so it does help. I'm really interested in hearing Jasmine's talk about this new pheromone that apparently they've been working on back east, and how well that might work for baiting and traps, because we tried that sidetrack and traps too, and it just wasn't working. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have more information on that. This is a 2-year study supported by the Mellon Board, so it's I think there's some great work coming out of this. So. And then lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about stink bugs, and these are the worst. We had a really great program a couple of weeks ago about the brigada bug and how to manage that. But there's new ones coming in. I mean, the typical ones that we've had are the red-shouldered southern green and the consperse, and then the new ones like the brigada bug, brown marmorated, and the brown stink bug have come in. And I always love this comic. I'll let you guys read that about stink bugs. They, of course, we all know they can do, quite a bit of damage, and they have a fairly wide host range. And the life cycle of stink bugs, there was a Professor Les Ayler at UC Davis who was just really an amazing researcher that spent his career studying stink bugs, and they overwinter as adults, and you can find them in in particular in blackberry. They like to be up off the ground and tucked in little protected areas or behind tree bark. And the first generation comes out, and stink bugs like mustard, they like radish, and they like cheeseweed. And they come out of these hibernation about March. And then it's about the same time that the mustard and the cheeseweed are producing pods, and they like that seed, that high energy source to complete their development and lay eggs. So they come out and they feed on these weeds. They reproduce. Oh, ants! Somebody asked about benefits of ants. So he found that these are the egg masses, these white things right here, and the barrel-shaped eggs. And Les Ayler found like 80% of these stink bug egg masses in these surrounding weeds were preyed on by ants and pill bugs. And so those were actually really important for helping to keep numbers down. And then when the weeds would dry down, then they move into the adjacent crops where they cause a lot of damage. So really paying attention again to like weeds for what the weeds where you can build up some of these pests and the diseases and such is really, really important. And in terms of that either maybe just replacing that, the weedy habitat with, managed vegetation. This is actually Toyon right here at the Rominger's farm. And we've done a lot of work on looking at the impact of these hedgerows in terms of economics for bringing in natural enemies and also bees. And through the work that we've done these last, 25 years on these systems with number of researchers from everywhere, and UC Berkeley and Davis, and what we found is that for an investment of like $4,000 to put in a hedgerow, that you do see returns. So after 15 years for insecticide savings alone, that those people who had hedgerows didn't have to spray for aphids in particular and stink bugs in their tomatoes as much as people who did not have a hedgerow. So these hedgerows are really serving as sites where the natural enemies build up, and they do go out into fields, the adjacent fields, and we see that effect basically for 40-acre blocks. So you would have to have a hedgerow every 40 acres to see the effect. And if you add in pollination, because we also see the pollinators, then you get your return on your investment of putting in a hedgerow, say after 7 years. So these systems do work. We've measured them, and they have, I think, that underestimating them, but also birds and such, that insectivorous birds are using them. And so natural enemies and bees, so diversification, as you guys already know, is good. I just wanted to finish by saying that all habitat is not equal. That this is a cover crop in a walnut orchard, and there's going to be tomatoes planted in the adjacent crops. And when I sampled in here, I found quite a few stink bugs on the mustard, and in the foreground, the yellow flowering plant, and then the bell beans here are one of the main hosts for the tomato spotted wilt virus. So just pay attention to the plants that you're selecting when planting on your farm, to make sure that you're choosing ones that support the beneficials, but don't favor any pests. So gosh, this is my final slide here. This is a field down in the Dixon area where the Solano RCD had planted a hedgerow next to a tomato field, or next to a field where it's a low spot, and just decided to incorporate some habitat planting there. But gosh, that it's really an integrated approach to controlling these pests and diseases in fields. And I just got a call from, or a note from a professor of plant pathology down at UC Berkeley, and he wants to do a study looking at basically how microbes, pathogenic microbes and beneficial microbes are colonizing plants, and he thinks that if you get the beneficial microbes out there, that they can really help to get rid of and outcompete pathogens. And so he is really eager to do a study at Steve Lindau out of UC Berkeley. So I'd love to contact some of you guys to maybe see if he can do some monitoring out in your fields this summer, because he was looking for some field sites. So that's it. Thank you guys for oh gosh, for all your knowledge and wisdom, and so we'll open it up for additional questions.
1 second, I have to log off because I have to teach another class, but thank you very much. It was really interesting, and I'll be summarizing this and sending out a summary as well as the links. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for the great talk.
Yeah, okay, great to see you guys. Bye. Are we logging off now? Oh, if anybody has any questions, you can also.
No, I just need to log off, but I think other people can stay in.
Okay, great, good. I know it's 1 o'clock, everybody. So, so if you have any other thoughts or questions or comments, gosh, I always love talking to you guys and hearing more.
Just a comment: you farm advisors always show too many scary photographs, and if a farmer looks at too many of them in the day, they can't sleep very well at night. So I
hear you. I hear you. I'm thinking of, some of them, like the predators are the best. I wish I could have shown you the ones where the ladybug was attacking the aphids.
I was going to ask, is that beneficial insect poster available in Spanish?
Oh, good question. I will check on that.
Because we used to, we had 50 full-time employees on 75 acres, and we had people sticking their heads in plants all day long, either pulling weeds or harvesting or whatever. And so we tried to educate all of our workers on identifying, well, at least observing and identifying pests and beneficials as well, and then to report them up the ladder. Because when you have, as few and ineffective tools as we have for remediation in organic systems, the early warning is really, really important. And so we had a network of information coming, through the funnel to be way ahead of the curve, if possible, when possible. Yeah.
I'll take a look at that. I thought they had, but I'll have to check with UCIPM and double check that. And then we'll see if we can get an ant talk. And I would actually love for Steve Lindau to give a talk on just the pathogens and microbes that are in the air, and how it differs depending if you're over an alfalfa field or almonds or like a city, and how that affects colonization of pathogens. I wonder if we can get him to give a talk too. There's a lot of neat stuff going on. I'll check on that. Good. Great. Awesome.
This really is a great series. So thank you.
Yeah.